The gunshot that shattered the evening calm of Cottonwood Creek, Wyoming territory, in 1876 wasn't aimed at Rosalie Linden, but it might as well have been. The bullet splintered the wooden post just inches from her face, sending her heart racing and her body diving for cover behind a water trough as laughter erupted from the saloon porch. "Look at the schoolmarm run," a drunken voice called out, followed by more raucous laughter. Rosalie's cheeks burned with humiliation as she crouched in the dirt, her navy blue traveling dress now soiled at the hem. She had arrived in Cottonwood Creek just 3 days ago, hired as the town's new schoolteacher, and already she'd become a target for the local troublemakers. "That's enough." A deep voice cut through the laughter, and Rosalie peered over the edge of the trough to see a tall man striding down the street, his hand resting casually on the gun at his hip. Even in the fading light, she could see the silver star pinned to his vest. "Just having some fun, Marshal," one of the men protested. "Your fun's over, Wilkes. Hand over that pistol before you hurt someone who matters." The saloon doors swung open, spilling more light onto the dusty street as another man stepped out. Unlike the others, he moved with purpose and control, his face partially shadowed by the brim of his hat. "Everything all right, Marshal?" The newcomer's voice was quiet but carried the weight of authority. "Fine, Tucker. Just some boys who have had more whiskey than sense." Rosalie watched as the man called Tucker descended the steps, his spurs jingling softly with each step. When he reached her, he offered his hand without hesitation. "Madam, I think it might be safer for you inside." Ignoring his outstretched hand, Rosalie pushed herself up, brushing dust from her skirts. "I don't need protection, sir. I need those men to be held accountable." The marshal approached, looking apologetic. "Miss Linden, I'll have a word with them." These boys nearly shot me," she interrupted, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "And I suspect it wasn't entirely accidental." Tucker Prescott studied the woman before him with newfound interest. Most Eastern women would be in tears by now, but the schoolteacher stood her ground, chin raised, blue eyes flashing with indignation. "Marshal," Tucker said, not taking his eyes off Rosalie, "I believe Miss Linden deserves more than words. Perhaps the gentleman responsible should spend the night in your jail," the marshal sighed. "Tucker, you know I can't or won't, Marshal Grayson," Rosalie challenged. "I was brought to this town with promises of respect and safety. So far, I've seen little of either." More men had gathered on the saloon porch, watching the exchange with amused interest. One of them, a red-faced man with a patchy beard, called out, "Schoolmarm's got a temper to match that red hair. Careful, Prescott, she might try to teach you your letters." Laughter rippled through the crowd again. Rosalie felt her patience snap. Before either man could stop her, she marched toward the saloon, stopping at the bottom of the steps. "Which one of you fired that shot?" she demanded. The laughter died away, replaced by uncomfortable shuffling. A young man with dirty blonde hair stepped forward, a sneer on his face. "What if I did? What's a woman like you going to do about it, Billy?" the marshal warned. "That's enough." Rosalie's hand moved to her reticule, and in one swift motion she withdrew a small Derringer pistol. The crowd gasped collectively as she aimed it steadily at the young man's chest. "I may be a schoolteacher, sir, but I'm also from Missouri, and we don't take kindly to being shot at." The men on the porch exploded in laughter again, even as Billy took a step back. "Put that toy away before you hurt yourself," someone called. "The lady has spirit, I'll give her that," another chuckled. Tucker Prescott moved to stand beside her, his expression unreadable. "I'd be careful, gentlemen. A small gun can make just as big a hole as a large one." The marshal approached, hands raised placatingly. "Miss Linden, please lower your weapon. I give you my word these men will be dealt with." For a tense moment, Rosalie kept her arm raised, then slowly lowered it. The moment she did, Billy lunged forward, snatching the Derringer from her hand. "Let's see how brave you are now, schoolmarm," he sneered, turning her own weapon on her. What happened next stunned everyone present. Instead of cowering, Rosalie stepped forward and slammed her knee into Billy's groin. As he doubled over, she wrenched the gun from his grasp and delivered a swift punch to his jaw that sent him staggering backward. The saloon fell silent, every man frozen in disbelief. Then, slowly, the laughter began again, louder than before. "Did you see that? The schoolmarm just laid Billy out." "Where'd you learn to fight like that, miss?" "Certainly not in any finishing school I know of." Rosalie stood her ground, breathing hard, the derringer once again firmly in her grasp. The marshal looked torn between amusement and concern. Tucker Prescott stepped forward, positioning himself between Rosalie and the crowd. There was no mockery in his expression, only a newfound respect. "They laughed when you fought back," he said quietly, his voice carrying just to her ears. "Fight beside me now." The words hung in the air between them, a challenge and an offering both. "What do you mean?" she asked, not lowering her guard. "This town needs people willing to stand up for what's right. I could use someone like you," Tucker explained, his voice low and serious. "I'm not just a rancher, Miss Linden. I'm trying to bring law to this territory, real law, and I think you might be exactly the kind of ally I need." Before she could respond, the marshal cleared his throat. "All right, show's over. Billy, you and your friends clear out." "Miss Linden, I'd appreciate it if you'd put that firearm away before someone else gets ideas." Rosalie tucked the derringer back into her reticule but kept her eyes on Tucker Prescott. There was something about him that intrigued her, not just his handsome face with its strong jawline and steady gray eyes, but the quiet authority he carried without flaunting it. "I should escort you home," Tucker offered once the crowd began to disperse. "That won't be necessary, Mr. Prescott. I'm staying at Mrs. Holloway's boarding house just down the street." "I insist," he said, offering his arm. After a moment's hesitation, she took it. As they walked through the darkening street, Tucker spoke again. "Where did you learn to defend yourself like that?" Rosalie's lips curved into a small smile. "My father was a Union officer. He believed his daughters should know how to protect themselves, especially after the war." "He taught you well," Tucker observed. "Yes, he did." Her voice softened with memory. "He died last year, consumption." "I'm sorry for your loss." They walked in silence for a moment before Rosalie spoke again. "What did you mean back there? About fighting beside you?" Tucker stopped walking, turning to face her directly. "Cottonwood Creek is at a crossroads, Miss Linden. There are those who want to keep it lawless where might makes right, and there are others, myself included, who believe in building something better. And you think I could help with that? I'm just a schoolteacher. You're clearly more than that." His eyes met hers steadily. "This territory needs education, yes, but it also needs courage. You showed plenty of that tonight." They had reached the boarding house, its windows glowing warmly against the gathering dusk. On the porch, Tucker removed his hat, revealing dark hair with a hint of curl. "I'd like to call on you properly, Miss Linden. Perhaps Sunday after church?" Rosalie studied him, weighing her response. She had come west to escape the constraints of Eastern society, to build a new life on her own terms. Getting involved with a man, even one as intriguing as Tucker Prescott, hadn't been part of her plan. "I'll consider it, Mr. Prescott." He smiled then, a genuine expression that transformed his serious face. "I look forward to your answer. Good night, Miss Linden." As he walked away, Rosalie couldn't help but watch him go, wondering what exactly she had gotten herself into by coming to this wild place. The schoolhouse sat on the edge of town, a simple clapboard building with 2 windows and a bell tower that had seen better days. As Rosalie approached the following morning, she was surprised to find Tucker Prescott already there, hammering at the broken steps. "Mr. Prescott," she called. "What are you doing?" He looked up, wiping sweat from his brow despite the early hour. "Good morning, Miss Linden. I thought I'd fix these steps before some child takes a tumble." "That's very kind, but hardly necessary. The town council assured me they would see to repairs." Tucker's expression turned wry. "The town council has been promising repairs for the last 3 teachers. None stayed long enough to see them happen." Rosalie set down her leather satchel, frowning. And why is that, do you think, the short tenure of my predecessors? This isn't an easy place for those accustomed to civilization, he said, driving another nail into the wood. The last schoolmaster left after someone shot out the windows. The teacher before that was run out of town for trying to teach the children of Mexican ranchers alongside the others. Rosalie's jaw tightened. And you believe I'll meet a similar fate after what I saw last night? Tucker smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. No, Miss Linden, I think you might be exactly what Cottonwood Creek needs. She wasn't sure how to respond to that, so she changed the subject. Do you have children in the school, Mr. Prescott? No, madam, never married. He finished with the step and stood, brushing sawdust from his hands. But I believe education is the foundation of any decent society. An unusual perspective for a cowboy, she observed. I wasn't always a rancher. Something in his tone suggested there was more to the story, but he didn't elaborate. Instead, he gestured to the door. Shall we see what other repairs are needed? Inside, the schoolroom was bare but clean, with rows of rough-hewn desks facing a larger desk and blackboard. Rosalie had spent the previous day scrubbing every surface, determined to start her tenure in a proper learning environment. You've been busy, Tucker noted, looking around appreciatively. A clean classroom encourages a disciplined mind, she replied, moving to open the windows and let in the fresh morning air. What else can you tell me about Cottonwood Creek, Mr. Prescott? The kind of information not included in official correspondence. Tucker leaned against one of the desks, considering his answer. It's a town divided. The original settlers' ranchers mostly want stability and growth, but the mining companies are pushing in from the east, bringing workers and troublemakers. Then there are the saloon owners and gamblers who profit from chaos. And where do you stand in this division? With those who want to build something lasting. His gaze was direct. The West won't be wild forever, Miss Linden. Those who can't adapt to civilization will eventually be left behind. Before she could respond, the door opened and a small face peered in, a girl of about 8 with dark braids and curious eyes. Miss Linden, the child asked hesitantly. Yes, come in. Rosalie smiled warmly. And you are Maria Vasquez, miss. The girl stepped inside, clutching a slate and primer. Papa said school starts today. Indeed it does, in about an hour. Rosalie glanced at the small clock on her desk. You're quite early. Maria's eyes darted to Tucker, then back to Rosalie. Papa had to work. He said it's safer if I'm here. The unspoken implication hung in the air. Tucker pushed himself away from the desk, his expression softening as he addressed the child. Good morning, Miss Vasquez. Your father is a wise man. Education is a precious thing. Maria nodded solemnly. He says it's how I become American. Rosalie felt a pang in her heart. Well, you're welcome to stay. Perhaps you could help me prepare for today's lessons. As the girl eagerly took a seat, Tucker moved toward the door. I should let you prepare. Good luck today, Miss Linden, Mr. Prescott, she called as he reached the door. Thank you for the repairs. He tipped his hat with a smile. Sunday after church then, with Maria watching with open curiosity, Rosalie felt heat rise to her cheeks. We'll see, Mr. Prescott. After he left, Maria looked up at her with wide eyes. Is Mr. Prescott courting you, Miss Linden? No, child. We've only just met. Rosalie busied herself with arranging books on her desk. Now, let's see about those lessons. By noon, the schoolroom was filled with 20 children ranging in age from 6 to 16. Most were from ranching families, but there were 5 Mexican children, including Maria, and 2 whose father worked for the new mining company. To Rosalie's relief, they seemed to mix without obvious tension, though she noticed the older boys tended to separate along lines of their father's occupations. The day passed quickly, with Rosalie assessing each child's level of education. Some could barely read, while others showed surprising proficiency in mathematics and history. By the final bell, she was exhausted but satisfied with her first day. As the children filed out, a shadow darkened the doorway. Expecting Tucker, she looked up with a smile that quickly faded when she saw Billy, the young man from the previous night leaning against the frame. "Afternoon, schoolmarm," he drawled, his eyes traveling over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "School is dismissed for the day," she said coolly. "If you have business here, state it quickly." He sauntered into the room, running his finger along the edge of a desk. "Just curious about our new teacher. Heard you're quite spirited." Rosalie kept her expression neutral, though her heart had begun to race. "If you're referring to last night's incident, I would prefer to put it behind us." "See, that's the problem." Billy's tone hardened. "Men in this town have a certain reputation to maintain. Can't have a woman making them look foolish." I wasn't aware that defending oneself was considered making others look foolish. Rosalie moved behind her desk, keeping furniture between them. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm not finished," he snapped, moving closer. "You need to understand how things work here. I believe Miss Linden understands perfectly well." Tucker stood in the doorway, his stance relaxed but his eyes hard as flint. Behind him were two other men Rosalie hadn't met. Billy's demeanor changed instantly. "Just welcoming the teacher to town, Prescott. No harm in that. Then you've done your duty. Good day." For a tense moment, Rosalie thought Billy might refuse to leave, but after a brief staring contest with Tucker, he skulked toward the door. "This isn't over," he muttered as he brushed past. Once he was gone, Tucker introduced his companions. "Miss Linden, these are my friends Samuel Walsh and James Cooper. They help me run the Rocking P." The men touched their hats respectfully. They were both older than Tucker, with the weathered faces of men who'd spent their lives outdoors. "We thought we might escort you back to town," Tucker explained. "Seems like the neighborly thing to do." Rosalie wanted to refuse, to insist she could manage on her own, but the encounter with Billy had unsettled her more than she cared to admit. "That would be most kind," she conceded, gathering her things. As they walked toward town, Tucker fell into step beside her while his friends followed at a discreet distance. "Billy Wilkes has a habit of holding grudges," Tucker said quietly. "His father owns the largest saloon in town and thinks that gives the family certain privileges. I won't be intimidated, Mr. Prescott. I never thought you would be." There was admiration in his voice, "but there's no shame in accepting help when it's offered." "Is that what you're offering?" "Help, for now." His eyes met hers, and there was something in them that made her breath catch. "As for what comes later, well, that depends on you." The next few days established a pattern. Rosalie would arrive at the schoolhouse each morning to find Tucker or one of his men had made some small improvement, a repaired window, a new shelf for books, or fresh chalk for the blackboard. He never mentioned these acts directly, and she never thanked him explicitly, but a silent understanding grew between them. By Sunday, Rosalie found herself watching the church door with anticipation, her stomach fluttering when Tucker entered, dressed in a clean dark suit that transformed him from rancher to gentleman. After the service, he approached her, hat in hand. "Good morning, Miss Linden. I hope you'll do me the honor of accompanying me for dinner at the hotel restaurant." Mrs. Holloway, Rosalie's landlady, who had appointed herself unofficial chaperone, beamed approvingly. "What a lovely invitation. Miss Linden was just saying she hadn't had a proper meal all week." Rosalie shot the older woman a reproachful look. "I said no such thing, Mrs. Holloway." "Well, you should have. A young woman needs more than books and chalk dust to sustain her." Tucker's lips twitched with suppressed amusement. "I assure you, Mrs. Holloway, I'll see that Miss Linden is well fed and returned home at a respectable hour." "See that you do." The older woman patted his arm. "You young people enjoy yourselves. I'll just visit with my sister this afternoon." As they walked toward the hotel, Rosalie shook her head. "Mrs. Holloway seems determined to see me married off. Can you blame her? A woman of your intelligence and beauty won't remain unattached for long in a town with so few eligible ladies." The compliment, delivered so matter-of-factly, caught Rosalie off guard. "Mr. Prescott, you hardly know me." "I'm a good judge of character." They reached the hotel and he opened the door for her. "And I'd like to know you better if you'll permit it." The hotel dining room was the most elegant establishment in Cottonwood Creek, which wasn't saying much. Still, the white tablecloths and actual silverware represented civilization in a town that often seemed to teeter on the edge of lawlessness. Once they were seated and had ordered, Tucker leaned forward slightly. "Tell me about yourself, Miss Linden. What brought you all the way from Missouri to Wyoming territory?" Rosalie considered how much to reveal. "After my father died, there seemed little reason to stay. I was teaching at a small school in St. Louis, but the position offered little independence. When I saw the advertisement for a teacher in Wyoming territory, I thought it might be an adventure. Most people looking for adventure don't choose teaching as their path. Perhaps that says more about your limited view of teaching than my desire for adventure," she countered with a smile. Tucker laughed, a warm, genuine sound that transformed his features. "Touché, Miss Linden, I stand corrected." Their food arrived: roast beef with potatoes for him, chicken and dumplings for her, and they ate in companionable silence for a few moments. "And you, Mr. Prescott?" she finally asked. "You mentioned you weren't always a rancher." His expression grew more guarded. "No, after the war I spent some time as a lawman in Kansas. Before that, I was a surveyor for the railroad." "That explains your interest in civilization coming to the West." "I've seen what happens in places without law," he said quietly. "It's rarely the strong who suffer most." There was something in his tone that suggested personal experience, but Rosalie didn't press. Instead, she asked about his ranch, and he spoke with evident pride about the rocking pea, the herd of Herefords he was introducing to improve his stock, and his plans for expansion. "You sound quite settled here," she observed. "I am. This is home now." He studied her face. "Could you see yourself settling in a place like Cottonwood Creek?" It was a loaded question, and they both knew it. "I haven't decided yet. There's much to recommend it, but also challenges. Like Billy Wilkes, among others." She set down her fork. "The town seems divided about whether it wants to embrace progress or remain as it is. That's true of most frontier settlements." Tucker's expression grew serious. "But sometimes it takes just a few committed individuals to tip the balance." "Is that what you meant when you asked me to fight beside you?" "Partly." His eyes held hers steadily. "This town needs a school and a teacher who won't be driven away by the first sign of trouble, but it also needs people willing to stand for something better." "And you think I'm one of those people?" "I know you are." His confidence was both flattering and unsettling. "I saw it the moment you stood up to those men outside the saloon." The rest of their meal passed pleasantly, with conversation ranging from books they had both read to the changing seasons and the upcoming harvest festival. Tucker proved to be well-read and thoughtful, challenging Rosalie's assumptions about Western men as they walked back toward Mrs. Holloway's boarding house. Tucker offered his arm and Rosalie took it without hesitation. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the street, and for once, Cottonwood Creek seemed peaceful. "I've enjoyed your company, Miss Linden," Tucker said as they reached her door. "As I have yours, Mr. Prescott." He hesitated, then asked, "Would you allow me to call on you again?" "Perhaps next Sunday." Before she could answer, the sound of galloping horses interrupted them. 3 riders came tearing down the main street, whooping and firing shots into the air. People scattered for safety, and Tucker instinctively pulled Rosalie against the wall of the boarding house, shielding her with his body. "Wilkes's men," he muttered, his expression darkening. "Causing trouble again." As the riders passed, one of them shouted, "Evening, schoolmarm. Teaching our children any more of your northern ideas tomorrow?" The implication was clear. They knew her schedule and were watching her. Tucker stepped into the street, his hand moving to his hip where Rosalie now noticed he wore a gun even with his Sunday clothes. "Keep riding, Phillips," he called. "The lady isn't interested in your company." The riders circled back, slowing their horses to a walk as they approached. The leader, a man with a thick mustache and cold eyes, sneered down at Tucker. "Since when do you speak for the schoolteacher, Prescott?" Getting soft on her already. "Move along." Tucker repeated, his voice level but with a dangerous edge. "You've had your fun. Maybe we're just getting started." Phillips's eyes shifted to Rosalie. "What do you say, schoolmarm? Want to see what real Wyoming men are like?" Before Tucker could respond, Rosalie stepped forward. "I believe I've already seen what passes for men in your circle, Mr. Phillips. I'm not impressed." The man's face darkened with anger, but before he could reply, another voice cut through the tension. "That's enough." Marshal Grayson strode toward them, rifle in hand. "Phillips, you and your boys clear out before I decide Sunday's a good day to fill my jail." For a moment, Phillips looked like he might argue, but then he spat in the dirt and wheeled his horse around. "Another time, then," he called over his shoulder as they rode away. The marshal approached, looking weary. "Sorry about that, Miss Linden. Some folks aren't taking kindly to your methods." "My methods?" Rosalie asked, confused. "I've only been teaching for a week." Grayson and Tucker exchanged a look. "Word is you've been teaching the Mexican children to read English alongside the others," the marshal explained. "And yesterday you gave a lesson on President Lincoln that some found provocative." "I taught basic American history," Rosalie said, indignation rising in her voice. "If facts are now considered provocative, then education itself is under threat." "You're not in St. Louis anymore," Grayson said, not unkindly. "Things are different here." "They don't have to be," Tucker interjected. "That's the point, isn't it? We're building something new here." "Why replicate the worst aspects of what we left behind?" the marshal sighed. "Noble sentiments, Prescott, but words won't stop a bullet." He tipped his hat to Rosalie. "Be careful, Miss Linden, not everyone shares your vision of progress." After he walked away, Rosalie and Tucker stood in silence for a moment. "Perhaps you should reconsider your Sunday invitation, Mr. Prescott," she finally said. "It seems association with me might be hazardous to your reputation." To her surprise, Tucker smiled. "Miss Linden, if I were concerned about my reputation, I wouldn't have settled in Cottonwood Creek in the first place." He took her hand gently. "May I call on you next Sunday?" Looking into his steady gray eyes, Rosalie found herself nodding. "Yes, Mr. Prescott, you may." The week that followed brought escalating tensions. On Monday, Rosalie arrived at the schoolhouse to find crude words painted across the door. She cleaned it herself before the children arrived, refusing the help offered by Mrs. Holloway's teenage son who had accompanied her that morning. On Tuesday, someone shot through one of the newly repaired windows during the lunch hour when the children were outside. The bullet embedded itself in the wall opposite Rosalie's desk, a clear message about where it had been aimed. Marshal Grayson investigated but claimed there were no witnesses. By Wednesday, 3 families had withdrawn their children, citing concerns about Northern influence in the curriculum. Rosalie continued teaching those who remained, including all 5 Mexican children and the mining engineer's son and daughter, refusing to show how deeply the incidents had affected her. Tucker visited each evening, ostensibly to make repairs to the schoolhouse, but primarily, Rosalie suspected, to ensure she made it home safely. Their conversations during these times deepened, moving beyond pleasantries to substantial discussions about books, philosophy, and their visions for the future. "You don't have to stay, you know," Tucker said on Thursday evening as he replaced the shot-out window pane. "No one would blame you for returning east." Rosalie looked up from the essays she was grading. "Would you respect me if I did?" His hands stilled on the glass. "It's not about respect, Rosalie. It's about safety." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the intimacy of it hung in the air between them. "If I leave," she said quietly, "they win, and the children lose." Tucker set down his tools and crossed to her desk, kneeling beside her chair so they were at eye level. "There are other schools, other towns that would welcome your talents without the danger." "Are you asking me to leave, Tucker?" His expression was troubled. "No, God help me, I'm being selfish enough to hope you'll stay, even knowing the risks." Before she could respond, he reached out and took her hand. His palm was rough with calluses, warm against her skin. "I haven't felt this way about anyone in a long time, maybe ever," Rosalie's heart quickened. We've known each other barely 2 weeks. Some things don't need time. His eyes searched hers. Tell me you don't feel it too, and I'll never speak of it again. She couldn't lie, not to him and not to herself. I feel it, she admitted softly, but feelings aren't always enough in a world like this. They can be the start. He lifted her hand and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. Give me a chance to show you what's possible here. The moment was broken by the sound of horses outside. Tucker was on his feet instantly, moving to the window. His expression hardened as he looked out. It's Wilkes and his son with Phillips and several others. He turned to Rosalie. Stay inside and lock the door behind me. What are you going to do? Talk to them. His hand moved to his gun belt. Hopefully that's all that will be necessary. I'm coming with you. Rosalie, this is my fight too, Tucker. She reached into her desk drawer and withdrew her derringer. You asked me to fight beside you, did you mean it? For a moment he looked like he might argue, but then his expression softened. I meant it, but stay behind me. They stepped onto the schoolhouse porch together as 6 riders drew up in front of the building. Rosalie recognized Silas Wilkes, the saloon owner, at the front alongside his son Billy. The others were ranch hands and miners she had seen in town but didn't know by name. Evening, Prescott, Silas called. Didn't expect to find you here. This is a matter between the town and its schoolteacher. Miss Linden is under my protection, Tucker replied evenly. Billy sneered. We've noticed. Getting mighty cozy with the Yankee woman, aren't you? Tucker ignored the taunt, addressing the elder Wilkes instead. What's your business here, Silas? Just delivering a message. The saloon owner shifted in his saddle. The town council has met. We've decided Miss Linden's services are no longer required. Rosalie stepped forward. The town council has no authority to dismiss me. I was hired by the Territorial Education Board. Board's a long way off, Phillips drawled. And we've decided we want a different kind of education for our children. What kind is that? Rosalie challenged. The kind that keeps certain children ignorant. That teaches hatred instead of knowledge. Silas Wilkes's face darkened. Watch your tongue, woman. We won't have our children taught by someone who doesn't respect our ways. If your ways include shooting at a schoolhouse while children are present, then no, I don't respect them, Rosalie replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. No one's trying to hurt the children, Phillips protested. Just sending a message. A message received and rejected, Tucker said firmly. Now I suggest you all head back to town. This conversation is over. Billy Wilkes spurred his horse forward a few steps. It's over when we say it's over, Prescott. Your ranch may be the biggest around here, but you don't run this town. Neither do you, Billy. Tucker's hand rested casually on his holstered gun. This territory has laws now. Threatening a teacher is a criminal offense. Silas Wilkes laughed. Laws out here. The nearest judge is 3 days' ride and Marshal Grayson knows who pays his salary. Then perhaps it's time for a new marshal, Tucker suggested. One who remembers his oath. The tension in the air thickened. Rosalie could feel the situation balancing on a knife's edge, could see the men calculating whether violence was worth the risk. You're making a mistake, Prescott, Silas finally said. This woman isn't worth upending the order of things. She is to me. Tucker's voice carried absolute certainty, and to the children she teaches, and to anyone who believes in a better future for this territory. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, to Rosalie's surprise, one of the riders in the back turned his horse. I've had enough, he muttered. Didn't sign up to threaten no schoolteacher. Another followed, then a third. Soon only the Wilkes men and Phillips remained. Silas Wilkes pointed a finger at Tucker. This isn't over, Prescott, not by a long shot. His gaze shifted to Rosalie. As for you, schoolmarm, watch your back. Accidents happen out here all the time. With that, they wheeled their horses and rode away, leaving a cloud of dust in their wake. As soon as they were out of sight, Rosalie's knees weakened and she sat down heavily on the schoolhouse steps. Tucker joined her, his face grim. You were magnificent, he said quietly. I was terrified, she admitted. Courage isn't the absence of fear. He took her hand. It's standing your ground despite it. She looked at him, really looked at him, the strength in his features, the integrity in his eyes, the quiet determination in the set of his jaw. In that moment, something shifted inside her, a recognition that what she felt for this man went beyond attraction or admiration. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," Tucker said, rising and pulling her gently to her feet, "I take you back to town where you'll be safe. Tomorrow we fight." "Fight how?" "With the weapons we have, your words, my influence, and the support of those in town who want something better than Silas Wilkes's vision of the future." As they walked toward town in the gathering dusk, Rosalie felt a curious mixture of fear and hope. She had come west seeking independence and purpose. Instead, she had found danger and something else she hadn't expected, the possibility of love with a man who saw her strength rather than feared it. "Tucker," she said as they reached the edge of town, "thank you for standing with me today." He stopped walking and turned to face her. In the fading light, his expression was solemn. "I would stand with you against the whole world if necessary, Rosalie Linden." The sincerity in his voice stole her breath. Before she could think better of it, she rose on her toes and pressed a soft kiss to his cheek. "Then we'll face whatever comes together," she promised. The following morning, Rosalie arrived at the schoolhouse escorted by Tucker and two of his ranch hands to find three fathers already waiting with their children, including Maria's father, Rafael Vasquez, and the mining engineer, Arthur Thompson. "We heard about yesterday," Thompson said without preamble. "My children will continue their education, Miss Linden, regardless of Wilkes's threats." "As will mine," Vasquez added, his accented English careful and precise. "Education is why we came to America." Throughout the day, more children arrived until Rosalie had 15 pupils present, fewer than before, but more than she had dared hope for after the previous day's confrontation. She taught with renewed determination, aware that each lesson might be building more than knowledge, it might be building the future of Cottonwood Creek itself. At noon, Marshal Grayson appeared in the doorway, looking uncomfortable. "Miss Linden, could I have a word?" Outside on the schoolhouse steps, the marshal removed his hat, turning it nervously in his hands. "There's going to be a town meeting tonight at the church. The future of the school is on the agenda." "I see." Rosalie straightened her shoulders. "Will I be permitted to speak?" "It's not customary for women to address such gatherings," Grayson began, then held up a hand when he saw her expression darken. "But these aren't customary times. Yes, you'll be given the floor." "Thank you, Marshal." She studied him for a moment. "May I ask where you stand in all this?" Grayson sighed heavily. "I've been marshal here for 8 years, Miss Linden, seen a lot of changes, not all for the better, but threatening school teachers." He shook his head. "That crosses a line even for me. Will you say so tonight? I might." He settled his hat back on his head. "Depends on which way the wind's blowing." After he left, Rosalie returned to her classroom, her mind already composing the speech she would deliver that evening. By the time school dismissed, she had resolved to fight for her position with every weapon in her arsenal: reason, passion, and the undeniable truth that education was the key to the territory's future. Tucker arrived as the last children were leaving, his expression grave. "Word of the meeting has spread. It's likely to be a full house tonight." "Good," Rosalie said with more confidence than she felt. "The more people who hear, the better." He studied her face. "You're really prepared to do this, to stand before a hostile crowd and fight for your place here?" "I am." She gathered her papers with steady hands. "When I came west, I was looking for purpose. I think I've found it." Tucker stepped closer, lowering his voice though they were alone. "Rosalie, whatever happens tonight, know that my feelings for you won't change. If you're forced to leave, I'll follow." His words sent a shock through her. "You'd give up your ranch, everything you've built here." "Some things matter more." His eyes held her steadily. "Some people matter more." The enormity of his declaration left her speechless. Before she could formulate a response, he continued, "But that's a conversation for another time. For now, let's focus on making sure you don't have to leave at all." The church was already crowded when they arrived that evening, with nearly every adult in Cottonwood Creek in attendance. Rosalie noticed the clear division in the seating. Wilkes and his supporters on one side, those who favored the school on the other, with a nervous contingent of undecideds in the middle. Pastor Mitchell, a mild-mannered man who had welcomed Rosalie warmly on her first Sunday, called the meeting to order with a prayer for wisdom and civility. Rosalie suspected both would be in short supply before the night was over. Silas Wilkes spoke first, his arguments a mixture of tradition, prejudice, and thinly veiled threats about what might happen if outside influences were allowed to corrupt the town's children. His son Billy followed with a more inflammatory speech that drew murmurs of both approval and disgust from the crowd. When it was Rosalie's turn to speak, she approached the front with a calm she didn't feel, aware of Tucker's supportive presence a few rows back. "People of Cottonwood Creek," she began, her voice clear and steady, "I came here because I believe in the power of education to transform lives and communities. In my classroom, every child is equal in their right to learn, equal in their potential to grow, equal in their importance to the future of this territory." She paused, allowing her gaze to sweep the room. "I've been accused of teaching Northern ideas. If by that you mean the radical notion that all children deserve knowledge regardless of their parentage or background, then yes, I am guilty as charged." This drew a few chuckles from her supporters and scowls from the opposition. Encouraged, she continued, "Wyoming territory stands at a crossroads. You can choose to remain isolated, clinging to prejudices that the rest of the nation is slowly abandoning. Or you can embrace progress and build a community where education elevates everyone, where knowledge creates opportunity, where your children can dream bigger dreams than you ever imagined for yourselves." For nearly 15 minutes, Rosalie spoke from her heart, laying out her vision for what the school could be and what it could mean for Cottonwood Creek's future. When she finished, there was a moment of silence, then scattered applause from her supporters. Tucker rose next, his tall figure commanding attention without effort. "Many of you know me as a rancher, but before I came to Wyoming, I was a lawman in Kansas. I've seen towns tear themselves apart over the very issues we're facing tonight. And I've seen others rise above their differences to build something lasting." He spoke with quiet authority about the economic benefits of education, the increasing value being placed on schooling throughout the West, and the reputation Cottonwood Creek would gain for good or ill based on how it resolved this conflict. "A community that drives out its teacher because she dares to educate all children equally is not a community with a future," he concluded. "It's a relic of a past that's fading faster than many of us would like to admit." The debate continued for hours, with passionate speeches on both sides. As the night wore on, Rosalie began to sense a shift in the room, with more of the undecided moving toward support of the school. Even some who had initially sided with Wilkes seemed to be reconsidering. Finally, Pastor Mitchell called for a vote on whether Rosalie should remain as teacher. As hands were counted, she held her breath, feeling Tucker's steady presence beside her like an anchor in a storm. "By a vote of 37 to 29, the pastor announced, Miss Linden will continue as teacher of Cottonwood Creek School." The relief that flooded through Rosalie was so intense she nearly wept. Tucker's hand found hers, squeezing gently in quiet celebration. Not everyone accepted the outcome gracefully. Silas Wilkes stormed from the church, followed by his son and their closest supporters. As they passed Rosalie, Billy leaned in close enough that only she and Tucker could hear his words. "This isn't over, schoolmarm, not by a long shot." Tucker stepped forward, his voice equally low but laced with steel. "Yes, Billy, it is. The town has spoken, accept it or leave." Outside the church, well-wishers surrounded Rosalie, offering congratulations and support. Parents promised to send their children back to school, and several townspeople who had remained neutral until now pledged to help protect the schoolhouse from further vandalism. As the crowd dispersed, Tucker drew Rosalie aside. In the silver moonlight, his face was more open than she had ever seen it, hope and something deeper shining in his eyes. "You were magnificent," he said softly. "I've never heard anyone speak with such conviction." "I had something worth fighting for." She looked up at him, suddenly certain of what she wanted. Several things, actually. Understanding dawned in his expression. Rosalie, the crack of a gunshot cut through the night, followed by screams from the direction of the main street. Tucker immediately pushed Rosalie behind him, drawing his own weapon in a single fluid motion. "Stay here," he ordered, but she was already moving with him toward the disturbance. They reached the street to find chaos. Billy Wilkes stood swaying in front of the saloon, a smoking gun in his hand. On the ground before him lay Marshall Grayson, blood spreading across his chest. "Told you all it wasn't over," Billy slurred, clearly drunk. His eyes fixed on Rosalie with malevolent focus. "You're next, schoolmarm." Before he could raise his gun again, Tucker fired. The shot caught Billy in the shoulder, spinning him around and dropping him to his knees. Two men quickly disarmed him while others rushed to the marshal's aid. "Get the doctor," someone shouted, and a young boy took off running toward the physician's house at the end of the street. Tucker knelt beside Grayson, pressing his bandana against the wound to slow the bleeding. The marshal's eyes fluttered open, recognition dawning through the pain. "Prescott," he gasped. "Should have listened to you sooner." "Save your strength," Tucker advised. "Help's coming." Billy Wilkes was being restrained by several men, his father nowhere in sight. His wild eyes found Rosalie in the crowd. "This is your fault," he screamed. All of it, ignoring him, Rosalie knelt beside Tucker, taking the marshal's hand. "Hold on, Marshal Grayson. You stood up for what was right tonight. The town needs you." Dr. Wallace arrived moments later, his medical bag in hand. After a quick examination, his expression turned grave. "We need to get him to my surgery. Careful now, don't jostle him." 4 men lifted the marshal as gently as possible and carried him toward the doctor's office. Tucker rose, his hands stained with Grayson's blood, his expression hard as he turned to Billy Wilkes. "Where's your father?" he demanded. "Go to hell, Prescott," Billy spat. One of the men restraining Billy spoke up. "Silas rode out of town right after the meeting, said something about gathering friends." Tucker exchanged a glance with Rosalie, who read his concern immediately. "He's bringing reinforcements," she said quietly. "Likely." Tucker addressed the assembled townspeople. "We need to organize. Silas won't take this vote lying down, especially not after what his son's just done." Within minutes, a plan was forming. The men of the town who supported the school would take shifts guarding key buildings, the school itself, the church, and the marshal's office. Women and children would shelter together in the most defensible locations. Messengers would be sent to neighboring settlements requesting assistance from their lawmen. Through it all, Rosalie worked alongside Tucker, her quick mind and steady voice helping to calm fears and organize resources. As dawn approached, they found themselves alone for a moment in the marshal's office, where Tucker had been appointed acting marshal by town decree. "You should rest," he told her, noting the shadows beneath her eyes. "Tomorrow may be even more difficult than today." "I'll rest when you do," she replied, handing him a cup of coffee. "Besides, I'd rather be here with you than lying awake at Mrs. Holloway's imagining the worst." He took the cup gratefully, his fingers brushing hers. "Rosalie, if things go badly, they won't," she interrupted. "We have right on our side." "Right doesn't always win," he said gently. "Not without a fight. Then we'll fight." She moved closer, placing her hand over his heart. "Together like you asked me to." Tucker set down his coffee and covered her hand with his own. "When I said that, I never imagined putting you in danger." "I was already in danger. The difference is now I'm not facing it alone." He searched her face, finding only resolve where he had expected fear. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he lowered his head and brushed his lips against hers in a kiss so gentle it was barely there. Rosalie responded by rising on her toes, deepening the kiss. her hands sliding up to his shoulders as his arms encircled her waist. For a brief, perfect moment, the dangers facing them faded into the background, leaving only this connection, this certainty. When they parted, Tucker rested his forehead against hers. "When this is over," he promised, "we'll have that conversation about the future." "I'll hold you to that, Mr. Prescott." She smiled up at him, her heart fuller than she had ever known it could be. The rest of the night passed in tense anticipation, but dawn broke without incident. As the town awakened, news came from Dr. Wallace that Marshall Grayson had survived the night and, while gravely wounded, had a fighting chance of recovery. Billy Wilkes remained locked in the town jail, sullen and uncooperative. No one had seen his father or knew for certain, when not if he might return with reinforcements. By mid-morning, Rosalie had made a decision that surprised even Tucker. "I'm opening the school today," she announced as they shared a quick breakfast at the hotel. "Rosalie, that's not safe." "What better way to show we won't be intimidated?" She met his concerned gaze steadily. "The children need stability, especially now. And the town needs to see that life goes on, that we believe in our future enough to invest in it." Tucker wanted to argue but recognized the determination in her eyes. "At least let me post guards," he conceded. "And at the first sign of trouble, you get those children to safety." She agreed readily, and by 9 o'clock the school bell was ringing across Cottonwood Creek. To her delight and Tucker's relief, 18 children arrived for lessons, including several who had been withdrawn earlier in the week. The day passed with an odd mixture of normalcy and tension. Rosalie taught arithmetic and reading, geography and history, all while aware of the armed men standing guard outside and the uncertain future facing the town she had come to love. Just after the noon recess, one of Tucker's ranch hands burst into the classroom, his expression urgent. "Miss Linden, Mr. Prescott says to get the children to the church now. Riders coming from the east, at least 20 of them." With remarkable composure, Rosalie organized her pupils into pairs and led them quickly across town to the church, where other women were already gathering with children. After ensuring they were safely inside, she turned to leave. "Miss Linden, where are you going?" Mrs. Holloway called after her. "To find Mr. Prescott," she replied, not slowing her pace. She found him in front of the marshal's office with a dozen armed townsmen. In the distance, a cloud of dust marked the approach of the riders. "Rosalie, you should be at the church," Tucker said when he spotted her. "I told you before, this is my fight too." She pointed to a rifle leaning against the wall. "And I know how to use one of those." Before Tucker could protest, the riders came into view at the end of the street. Silas Wilkes rode at their head, flanked by men Rosalie didn't recognize, hired guns, most likely from the look of them. The group drew to a halt about 50 yards away. Silas urged his horse forward a few paces. "Prescott," he called, "I hear you've got my son locked up." "He shot Marshall Grayson," Tucker replied evenly. "He'll face territorial justice for it." "There's only one justice that matters out here," Silas snarled. "Send him out now or we're coming in to get him." Tucker didn't flinch. "There are 24 armed men in this town who disagree with you, Wilkes. How many of your friends are willing to die for your grudges?" For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Silas's face as he took in the number of defenders. He had clearly expected to find the town divided and vulnerable. "This is your doing," he said, pointing at Rosalie. "You turned these people against their own kind. These people made their own choice," she replied. "For education, for progress, for a future better than the past you're clinging to." Silas spat in the dust. Fine words from a woman who won't live to see sundown. At his signal, one of the hired guns raised his rifle, aiming directly at Rosalie. Tucker moved to shield her, but before anyone could fire, a new voice rang out. "Drop that weapon, or I'll drop you where you stand." Every head turned to see Marshall Grayson leaning heavily against Dr. Wallace, his chest bandaged but his gun steady in his hand. Despite his obvious pain, his voice carried the full weight of the law. "This ends now, Silas," the marshal continued. I've sent for the territorial authorities. They'll be here within 2 days. Anyone who fires a shot between now and then will hang for it, and that's a promise." The standoff stretched for what felt like eternity. Then, remarkably, the hired gun lowered his rifle. Murmurs ran through Silas's men as they exchanged glances, clearly reassessing the situation. "You're backing the wrong horse, Grayson," Silas said bitterly. "This town was fine before she came." "Was it?" the marshal asked. "Or was it just easier for men like you when no one questioned your authority?" He straightened despite his wound, his voice strengthening. "I swore an oath to uphold the law, Wilkes. All the law for all the people. It's time I started living up to it." One by one, Silas's hired guns began to drift away, unwilling to face murder charges for a local dispute that wasn't their fight. Soon only Silas and 3 loyal men remained. "This isn't over," he warned, echoing his son's earlier threat. "Yes, it is," Tucker replied. "Leave Cottonwood Creek, Silas. There's nothing here for you anymore." With a final curse, Silas Wilkes wheeled his horse and rode away, his remaining supporters following reluctantly. As the dust settled, Tucker turned to Rosalie, his expression a mixture of relief, admiration, and something deeper that made her heart race. "It's really over?" she asked. "For now, at least." He glanced at Marshal Grayson, who was being helped back to the doctor's office. "The territorial authorities will send a judge. Billy will stand trial for shooting the marshal and Silas for conspiracy if we can prove it." "And the school?" Tucker smiled, the tension finally leaving his shoulders. "The school will continue, with its remarkable teacher guiding the next generation of Cottonwood Creek citizens." That evening, as the town celebrated its victory with an impromptu gathering at the church, Tucker drew Rosalie away from the crowd, leading her to a quiet spot beneath the stars. "I believe we were about to have a conversation about the future before we were so rudely interrupted," he reminded her, his eyes warm in the lantern light. Rosalie smiled up at him. "I believe we were." Tucker took both her hands in his. "Rosalie Linden, I've known you for just 3 weeks, but in that time you've shown me more courage, intelligence, and compassion than I've seen in a lifetime. I'm asking you now with clear eyes and an open heart. Will you consider a future with me? Not just as Cottonwood Creek's teacher, but as my wife." Joy bloomed within her, bright and undeniable. "Are you certain? I'm not exactly the quiet, obedient type most men seek in a wife." "Thank God for that," he laughed softly. "I don't want obedience, Rosalie. I want a partner who challenges me, who stands beside me through whatever comes. I want you exactly as you are." In answer, she rose on her toes and kissed him, pouring all her newfound certainty into the gesture. When they parted, breathless and smiling, she whispered against his lips, "Yes, Tucker Prescott, yes to all of it." 1 year later, Rosalie stood on the porch of the new schoolhouse, larger, sturdier, and built with donations from the entire community, watching as her students filed out at the end of the day. Beside her stood Tucker, home early from the ranch to escort her to the town's harvest festival. "Mrs. Prescott," he said, offering his arm with a smile that still made her heart skip. "Shall we?" "We shall, Mr. Prescott." She took his arm, pausing to lock the schoolhouse door. As they walked toward town, she rested her free hand on her slightly rounded belly, a secret they would share with the town tonight. Cottonwood Creek had changed dramatically in a year. With Silas Wilkes gone, rumor had it he'd headed to Montana after his son was sentenced to 5 years in territorial prison. The town had begun to flourish. New businesses had opened, including a proper bookshop that Rosalie frequented regularly. The school now had 42 students of all backgrounds, and plans were already being made to hire a second teacher. "Have I told you today how much I love you?" Tucker asked as they neared the town square where the festival was being set up. "You have," she replied, "but I never tire of hearing it." He stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression tender as he placed his hand over hers on her abdomen. "And have I told you how excited I am to meet our child?" To raise a family with a woman who fought for what she believed in, even when everyone laughed. You have, Rosalie said softly, but I never tire of hearing that either. As they continued toward the festival, greeted warmly by townspeople who had become friends and allies, Rosalie reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had come west seeking independence and adventure. She had found those things and more purpose, community, and a love deeper than she had ever imagined possible. They had fought side by side for a vision of what Cottonwood Creek could become. Now they would build that future together, one day, one lesson, one child at a time. And if anyone ever again laughed when she fought back, she knew without doubt that Tucker would still be there beside her, ready to stand against whatever challenges came their way. Together, they were stronger than either could be alone, a truth they had discovered in the crucible of conflict, and would celebrate for all the days to come.